Sarve Janaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Distinguished guests on the dais, Dr. Giridhar Upadhyay, Mr. Prasanna Kumar, Sri Jagdish Shetty, Sri Murli Malayappan, and Sri Nikunj Shah. It's a great honor to be back amongst friends, amongst VHS, and I'm hoping that these kinds of talks will spur those of you who are still not decided to be members of VHS to also join up. It's been truly a pleasure, it's a treat, a joy to come for the conferences that take place at VHS. There's such robust sharing of ideas and thoughts, and that's what really keeps me going. So VHS, thank you very much for this opportunity. So I'd like to start by saying what exactly is P Gurus. And many people ask me what the P in the P Gurus stands for. The best explanation I can give is the P is what is in the logo, the pen. So we really believe in writing stuff. We believe in writing the truth. Sometimes the truth hurts, but it's like bitter medicine. It will make you better in the long term. If I could request Akshay Chandra to stand up, please. I'd like everyone to take a look at Akshay Chandra. In my opinion, he is the next R.K. Lakshman. All those cartoons, it's Akshay who dreams them up. Thank you, Akshay. I think a lot of you remember the one about Rahul Gandhi reading Upanishads, going into... See, you know the answer. So, he has an amazing sense of humor, and the way we work things out now, it has been absolutely a lot of fun. So thank you, Akshay. I would also like Mr. N.V. Krishna Kumar to stand up for a second. If you could just turn around the TV, I'd like to recognize Mr. N.V. Krishna Kumar. N.V. writes a lot for P Gurus, at least he used to. These days he has got this politics bug in him. He is trying to enter politics the hard way by being honest and trying to bring honesty into Karnataka politics. So we will know if he's going to stand as a candidate for Malleshwaram constituency. Good luck to you, N.V. I think Jagdish ji explained what P Guru stands for, so I'm not going to elaborate on that a whole lot. Let's move on because there's a lot of things that I'd like to share with you. Dr. Giridhar Upadhyay just now tells me that the Mythic Society is coming up with a series of 12 books on the real history of India. The first one is slated for release in a couple of months. A noted archaeologist, Sri Sundar, he's 90 years old, 90. Age is just a number, guys. These days, we can live as long as we want to. We can all be Bhishmas. And he's the one who's authoring it. So please, please, when the book comes out, support him. Hopefully you'll release it here and we'll all be here. Thank you. In our own small way, we did come out with the release, the Real History of India. It was a 14 series episode, and we talked about some rare kings like Lalitaditya, who went and conquered a lot of lands, way beyond Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, all sorts of places. So anyway, so thank you very much for this effort, sir. So next, what is C Company? So the name was intended to be catchy because D Company has been so popular and so famous for so many years. So anytime when somebody hears the word mentioned, C Company, it's going to pique their interest. What is the C in the C Company? So C Company is not an established company. It doesn't have a headquarters. It doesn't have an office. They don't meet, come to work at 9 o'clock and go home at 5. This is a group of individuals whose loyalty rests with an individual who's the be-all and end-all of the UPA government. Many of you may not know this, but Mr. Chidambaram, who's the C in the C Company, evidently those who were privy to what happened in the cabinet meetings and so on, Mr. Chidambaram had a fairly easy ride. Especially in the second term of UPA, only Pranab Da could stand up to him. And when Mr. Pranab Mukherjee became the president of India, he really had an easy run. I mean, he could do whatever he wanted. And you can see that effect in many of the things that even today, he's able to try and somehow twist things to make him, to favor him. So to understand this book, I'd like us to take a step back to 1991 when India opened up. The license Raj was dismantled by Tatagaru, P.V. Narasimha Rao, who amazes me with his life. If you haven't read the book by Vinay Sitapati about him, I highly recommend you to read that thing. It's called Half Lion. You know, Half Lion is Narasimha. So that's what it is. It's a splendid book which talks about how he managed those 5 years as a prime minister. I mean, it's a must-read book. And those of you, I mean, this is written like a novel, even though it's 400 pages thick. You can just breeze through the whole thing. Right, back to 1991. So the markets opened up in 1991, and India's stock markets also started opening up. Now, it was felt that India should have an electronic stock exchange. Just to get you a perspective on what an electronic stock exchange was, I want to take you back a little bit before that to how stock exchanges used to work up until then. Now, if you wanted to buy a stock, you would call up your broker and you would tell him, I want to buy 100 shares of Infosys for say 1400 rupees. And that day the market price may be like 1500. And the broker will take down your order, and then he will go to what is called as the well in the stock exchange, and he'll start shouting 100 shares of Infosys at 1400. And he will try and find somebody who wants to sell his 100 shares of Infosys for 1400. And once there is a buyer-seller match, the trade would happen. Now, in 1987, October of 1987, Wall Street crashed. 27% of the value of Wall Street crashed down in one day. And the reason it happened was it was just a series of events when people started panicking and they wanted to sell it. Now, what happened was, remember I told you, you have to call your broker to sell or buy stock. Now, many people were watching the TVs and seeing the stock markets, taking a big dive, and they were trying to call their broker to say that, sell my stock, and the brokers were not picking up their phones. Part of the reason was they were overwhelmed. The switchboards were overwhelmed. The calls were not going through. So whatever was a small stock crash got accentuated. Then the Securities Exchange Commission, the equivalent of SEBI in India, they decided that they need to automate the stock market. And from that point onwards, electronic stock markets started taking shape. Now, in 1994, the National Stock Exchange was opened with the view to start trading in electronic format. So the moment NSE took root, by the way, NSE was funded partly by government and partly by public institutions such as LIC and so on. NSE did not have a single private investor who put his own money into it. And within a very short time, NSE became the leader in India's stock markets. Before NSE, there were a lot of regional exchanges. You had an exchange in Chennai, you had one in Hyderabad, you had one in Kochi, Bangalore, you name it. These exchanges are still there, but they are just nominal. I mean, they do hardly any trading. NSE wiped them all out. Maybe that was for the better because this was an electronic stock exchange, so it did do a few good things. But what NSE also did was it started eating into Bombay Stock Exchange turf. Bombay Stock Exchange was a 140-year-old organization, and the brokers in Bombay Stock Exchange saw the writing on the wall, and slowly but steadily, all of them started gravitating towards NSE. And once that happened, NSE was reigning supreme. 1994, Mr. Chidambaram may have been out of power, but he was in power as Minister for Commerce, and then he quit that, but he came back into power, I think, towards the fag end of Narasimha Rao's career. So he was the Commerce Minister then. And then he was the finance minister in 1996 and 1997 through the Deva Gowda and Gujral governments. And then finally he became the finance minister in 2004. From 2004 to 2014, he reigned supreme. His word was law. I mean, it was more like God's will. And many people, they just got impressed by his clipped accent. Boy, I mean, I can put it on too. But it is believed that when he was under stress, he would fall back on his Chettiar accent. I don't know how many people have seen that, but Ram Jethmalani wrote about this. But see, this is another deception. We as Indians believe that because most of us cannot speak good English, therefore if somebody speaks good English, we think that that person therefore must be someone who's very accomplished. It's not true. These are all facades that people build up. And I think that was one of the reasons why I'm starting to write in Hindi and in Tamil and other regional languages also. Because knowledge is knowledge. Language is just a method of communication. Anyway, so as I said, BSE was losing its hold on the stock market, and a couple of engineers who used to work at BSE decided that they want to go out on their own. And one of the engineers took a mortgage of 1.5 lakhs on his home, and they got into this garage operations, and they started working on a software. This was called as ODIN, Open Data Interface Network. And what ODIN did was it allowed people to use their software to trade electronically. And this was released in 1997. Now, Odin had a really hard time creating a market for itself, because at that time, all the brokers used to buy software from IBM and Oracle. However, there were small brokers who could not afford the high fees of the US-based software. So they started buying Odin. And once they started realizing that Odin could match every feature of the US-based software, word started spreading around, and pretty soon Odin was across all brokers. So that's how the technology company called FTIL was born. Odin was their first product, and Jignesh Shah was the founder. Now, there has been a lot of chatter on Twitter and other social media platforms accusing me of NSEL. I'm not going to talk about NSEL here. I'm going to talk about the entrepreneur Jignesh Shah, because I see in this audience a lot of you who are going to go on to become entrepreneurs. And I'm going to try and explain to you the story that how he got sparked with new ideas. How many of you know Zaveri Bazaar in Bombay? Show of hands. Good, about at least a third of you know Zaveri Bazaar. Zaveri Bazaar is 300 years old, and it's perhaps the oldest and the biggest gold market in India. Now, what Zaveri Bazaar used to do was they would buy gold from the markets, and for them, the price of gold used to fluctuate because, you know, gold was being traded in London and a few other, in New York and a few other exchanges, and they couldn't really keep up with the price variations. Now, Shah used to go to talk to some of these big sellers in the Zaveri Bazaar, and he found out that the way they could keep up with the change price movements was to have a small PBX, you know, phone exchange, about 15, 16 slots, and they would call each other up. They didn't even trust the telephone line at that time. They would call each other up and say, okay, today market, London is this price, and so on and so forth. What Shah did was, he went and looked at this PBX. He saw that there were like 15 analog slots, and then there was one digital slot that was not being used. A thought went in his mind, and what he did was he figured out how the digital slot in that that system was, and then he programmed it such that he could have a simple, you know, streaming display in all these 14 different brokers, the different jewelers' offices, and it would automatically pick up the data from London and New York exchanges. It would start, you know, streaming it, just like the way ticket works. If you look at CNBC channel or any of the business channels, you'll see the ticker tape. So he had just invented this simple mechanism of making it automatic. So they just had to look up and see what the price was. This might not have made him millions, but it gained the trust of all these jewelers because his idea was just around the corner. He would talk to all these people, and he found that the jewelers were always looking at the 99.9% gold bars. By the way, there are two types of gold bars that are available: 99.9% purity and 99.5% purity. There's a big difference between the two, guys. I'll just explain to you in a minute. Now, if you look at Indian jewelry, right, we almost always make our jewelry 22 karat, not 24 karat. 24 karat is 100% gold. And you don't make jewelry of 100% gold because gold is a soft metal. I mean, you can even bite into a gold coin and you can see your teeth marks on the gold coin. So what they do, all jewelers do, is they add a bit of copper and some other alloys to make it stronger, and that's how the 22 karat gold is in place. Now, what used to happen was the 99.9% gold bars were being made available as derivatives. I don't know how many of you know about derivatives, so I'm going to take a small moment to explain to you what a derivative is. We all know stock market, stocks, right? Stocks you understand. It's just a thing, commodity. You buy 100 shares and you become an owner of Infosys and so on. In a derivative, what happens is, pretend that you are the jeweler. Now, the Indian demand for gold jewelry is cyclical because probably around Diwali, the demand really peaks and then it probably tapers off after January or so. I'm just making a guess. I could be wrong about it because I don't know when Akshaya Tritiya is. That is the peak day. That's the Black Friday equivalent of Black Friday for jewelers in India. So these traders wanted to be sure that when they needed the gold, that they can have an assured price on the gold bar. Okay, that is not, they're not buying the gold bar today because they don't want to buy gold for a jewelry that they're going to make 8-9 months in the future. That would be tying up their inventory. But what they did want to have is an assurance that the price of the gold bar, when they need it, say let's say 6 months from now, would be a certain number. And that is what is a derivative, it's a future derivative. In future, what you do is, you say, okay, today the gold bar costs, I'm just giving you easy numbers, $100. And I think that the gold bar is going to go up, and I will buy 6 months down the road gold bars at $150. Now, by the time 6 months end, the gold bar might be going at 120 only, which means they're going to lose $30 on the bar. But what if it went to 200? Then they're going to come out ahead by 50. The derivatives give you a certain amount of assurance so that you can plan your business around it. The same thing for airlines also. You know, petrol prices, crude prices go back and forth, back and forth. How can airlines operate? So they also trade in derivatives for futures. They do crude futures. Then they want to make sure that their crude pricing, you know, is fixed. So back to our jewelers problem. So they wanted 99.5% bars only because they figured that, you know, anyway I have to add something else to make gold jewelry here. Why do I have to pay for that extra 0.4% purity? Because the differential in the price between the two was quite a lot. To purify something to 99.9% takes a lot more effort than 99.5%. So that's where the light bulb went off. Jignesh Shah was the first one to figure out a derivative for the 99.5% gold bars. And because he was the first in the market, the idea really took off. And his exchange, called as the MCX, the Multi-Commodity Exchange, took shape. Multi-Commodity Exchange owed most of its success to the fact that they were the first ones out with the 99.5% hedging. So what happened? Once he came out with this, on the MCX, traders could figure out what was the, you know, they could hedge their prices. Hedging is to make sure that, you know, they can stay within a certain band sometimes, and also to do efficient price discovery. Efficient price discovery is, you know, automated exchanges can keep better track of how the price movements are happening across the world. So that's how MCX was born. Now, what is the magical formula for a startup? The magical formula is very simple. You identify a problem, you solve that problem, you grow as fast as you can with that, and you make sure that nobody else enters the market. And that's exactly what Jignesh Shah did. He had this one product, MCX Exchange, and he did a really, really good job designing that so that he could then go and grow it in many more vertical segments. You all know what vertical segments are, right? Vertical segments are, in startup parlance, what it means is you have a fundamental technology, and then by changing a screw here, changing a nut there, you can do a new product. And that takes a life of its own, and that starts running. Now, to be able to do all these things, you have to have very, very good fundamental technology. Without that, you can't do all the verticals. So, to give you a real-life example, think of, you know, what goes into making idli, dosa, uttapam, etc. You know, with a little bit of creativity, you can have one dough. Okay, with that one dough, you can do all these three things. It's something that's very, very similar to that. So, now, let's come to the crux of the problem. So, I'm making a statement right up front that the C company always supported the NSE. Now, there must be a reason for that. Why should a minister support one stock exchange over the others? After all, he's supposed to be a neutral body making laws and letting everybody prosper. If it is good competition, it's good for everybody, efficient markets, and everybody gets the benefit of that. However, if you look at the history, how NSE grew, it was almost always as if there was a blessing in the back to make sure that no matter what was the battle, NSE would always come out on top. NSE first beat out the Bombay Stock Exchange in many places, and then once Jignesh Shah's FTIL group of companies started becoming the market leaders, they started playing with them. They started trying to impede them in various ways. Now, So why was NSE's support needed? I don't know how many of you have been reading P-Gurus. I wrote about 6-8 months ago something called as a high frequency trading scam, HFT scam. Okay, I see one hand up. Thank you. 2, 3. So I'll just take a few minutes to explain what really high frequency trading scam was. There was these buzzwords in Wall Street called as co-location, high frequency trading, and India said, yeah, we have to have it too. So National Stock Exchange jumped in with both feet and they started doing the same thing. They did something called as co-location. They said it will give you improved efficiencies, you'll have more equity in the market, it will make markets more efficient, all sorts of things. However, with using the help of a few individuals, which I call a C company, a group of people made about 100 crores profit a day. That is $6 million a day. And there are 250 trading days in a year. Okay? So that comes to close to $4 billion a day. Now, for 5 years, these people milked that thing. So they made $20 billion. This is the HFT scam. And how did they do it? It's really laughable. The first thing they did was they allowed companies to co-locate along with the servers that did the actual trading. So in electronic trading, what happens is there is a national stock exchange server that arbitrates who is the buyer, who is the seller. They match the two. Okay, so when you had this thing called as co-location, what you could do is either the buyer or seller or both could have their computer very, very close to this server which is going to decide. Now, what is the advantage of that? I'll tell you. Supposing the buyer is sitting in that co-location, Bandra Kurla complex, and the seller is sitting in, say, Bangalore. Okay, the time it takes for the order to travel from Bangalore all the way to the server is much, much more than what the time it takes for the co-located system to solve. So think of it like there are two friends, Hari and Ravi. Ravi, both of them go to the same school. They take the same bus. Ravi stays in a house where the bus stand is right and outside his house. And Hari has to come like walk 3 streets to come and catch the bus. Guess what? Every day, one guy is going to be able to get into the bus. The other guy, maybe not, maybe yes. It depends upon how, he's going to plan it. So that was one trick. The other, and the way they did this is really sneaky. Many of you may have traveled abroad. So whenever you're going through the immigration line, right, there'll be like 10 different counters. And there'll be one officer who will be regulating traffic. He'll say, go to that 14, go to 12, go to 3, and so on. What he's essentially doing is he's balancing the lines so that everybody has the same amount of wait time. Now, in electronic parlance, this is called as a load balancer. Okay, so what is a load balancer supposed to do? Now, when the National Stock Exchange opens for business, they have like an array of 20 servers. All these 20 servers are supposed to be handling all these, sells and buy trades and so on and so forth. And the load balancer is sitting and he's doing the automatic job of the guy who directs traffic. He says he makes sure that all these 20 are having equal balance. But the geniuses in NSE, what they did? They didn't use the load balancer at all. Instead, to induce some sort of randomness, what they would do is, at the start of the trading day, they would randomly turn on these 20 servers. One day server 1 will go up first, another day server 4 will go up first, and so on. So there was absolutely no load balancing. And to make things worse, whoever got onto these servers first enjoyed like unparalleled access to the market. You could not take him out. If he was logged in for the whole day. This is one of the most worst ways that you can manipulate the stock exchange. What happened? One trading group in New Delhi figured out that there was this hardware operator who turns on the systems every day. So they told him, Baba, every time you turn on the computer, please let me know. So they would be ready to log in. Once they logged in, they would never let go. So this is one of the ways in which these guys were manipulating the market. Another way they did it, this is really even more mind-boggling. Imagine you are a student and you are getting your exam paper a day before the exam. Come on now, you'll be getting 100 out of 100 in every exam. That's exactly what happened. At 6:30 in the morning, India time, a group of people sitting in Singapore would get advance information of what trading is going to happen at 9:30, 3 hours before. And based on what stocks were in play, these guys could figure out the best algorithm that they can use to maximize profit. In the 3 hours, they would get the algorithm in place, then they would inform their tax haven friends. The money would come from tax havens. Obviously, it will go through Mauritius because of zero capital gains taxes. From Mauritius, it will come into the stock exchange. And when you have money coming in through a Mauritius-based company, guess what? You don't have to pay any capital gains tax. All the money that's made in the stock exchange is all capital gains free. All those of you who are going to pay LTCG, guess what? Anything that comes in through this route is not still taxed. It's very, very sad. So these are some of the ways in which they did it. And they could do all these things only in the NSE. I mean, it's incredibly sinister how this plan was hatched. Just a few individuals, half a dozen to a dozen at the most, they only knew what was really going on. So everybody else thought that, things were going fine, the stock market is going up, everybody's making money, and so on and so forth. But reality was that NSE was rigged. And I don't know if it is still rigged or not. Because one of the things that I've seen was, finally, a whistleblower from Singapore wrote about this. After 2-3 attempts, finally SEBI woke up and took notice, and they did their own investigation, and they did come up with some of the findings that I just described to you. But the SEBI has still not punished some of the officials who were at the wheel when all this happened. For example, Ravi Narayanan, Chitra Ramakrishna, and a set of 14 people. All of them are trying to bargain their way out of jail time, and which I think is a real grave travesty of justice. This is white collar crime. Many of us don't play in the stock market, so we think, okay, it doesn't matter, it doesn't affect me. Guess what? It is affecting you today, because many of you are jumping into this SIP plan, systematic investment plan, and money is being put into mutual funds, and the way the mutual funds are being described is that it's rock solid, that is going to give you 20% year-on-year returns. Don't believe any of that stuff. Do your homework. Make sure you have a good mutual fund into which you can invest. You can invest in Shriram, for example. They are a good company. Now, I'm not pitching for you. I'm saying this from the truth. I've heard a lot of stories about Shriram Finance, how they helped the rig operators who used to have this oil, the rigs that would give you borewell water and all that stuff. So, now, like I said, after MCX, a series of exchanges were developed by Jignesh Shah. He could go and work with the Dubai government, with the Emir, to have a 50-50 ownership of DGCX. Same way he had few other countries. Now, competing in India is one thing, but when you have to go and compete versus like New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ and get business, you really have to have your chops. You have to be competing with the best. So, I mean, no matter what you say about Jignesh Shah, he had that knack, that capacity to figure out how to come up with the best product possible. And in 2007, 2008, the government started allowing other people to make their own stock exchanges. And sure enough, Jignesh Shah applied for MCXSX. These words could be a little bit conflicting or confusing, but it's all explained in great detail in the book. So I want you to this is sort of like a preamble for you to go through the book to understand what else is there. So the first thing that they did, that is NSE, the C company guys with NSE, SEBI and Finance Ministry. The first thing they said was, for the MCXSX company, no entity could own more than 5%. This rule was not applied to any other exchange. This was something that they just dreamed it up. And they also said, if you have a group of companies, the combined investment from the group of companies had to still be 5%. When MCX was formed, okay, it had 51% of one company of Shah and 49% of another company of Shah. All of a sudden they said, you have to get rid of all this stuff. We can only allow you to own 2.5% each. The idea was to make them, to force them to go to the market to go get the funding. They applied for a full-fledged stock exchange, but they were only allowed to trade in currency derivatives. So they had to go back to court. And they said, well, we want to be able to have a full-fledged stock exchange just like the NSE. And they got dragged through the High Court, and then the Supreme Court, and finally in December 2012, the Supreme Court told SEBI that you can no longer stop MCX-SX from becoming an exchange. And in February 2013, in just 3 months' time after getting approval, MCX-SX went live. Guess what? MCX-SX did not allow co-location. Okay, and it did everything by the book, the way an exchange should be. But for these people, the writing was on the wall. They could no longer do all the tricks that they were doing in NSE in this new exchange. Plus, they know from past history that every time Shah entered a new territory, he was going to win in the long run. So, what did they do? They came up with a manufactured crisis in NSEL, which is one of his subsidiaries, and the rest, as they say, is history. Government moved with amazing alacrity to call all the entities not fit and proper, and Shah was forced to sell every one of his exchanges at fire sale prices. And the last last straw on the camel's back was the recent Bombay High Court judgment, whereby they said, with advice from MCA, that under Article 396, two companies, one is the NSEL and the other one is a profit-making company, that they too should be amalgamated. This is a very big blow if this stands up in Supreme Court, and I'll tell you why. There are two public companies, one making losses and one in making profit, and the High Court has said that the two have to be built together so that the remaining entity will be able to continue. Guess what? Anytime you can easily pull down somebody who's flying high. You can't pull up somebody who's flying low. That's gravity is there. Jupiter's gravity, in fact. So it's very difficult to do that. But if this thing stands up in Supreme Court, then it would be really, really bad for many of the conglomerates. We know for a fact, for example, if you take Tata Group of companies, TCS is the only one that's profitable today. Tata Steel, Tata this, Tata that, all of them are loss-making. But TCS makes up enough and then some for them to still run all these things. And then you'll start seeing this forced amalgamation. And I hope, wiser counsel prevails and that this will stop. So, in conclusion, I want to just say that this is just one instance of how Mr. Chidambaram, he is really the evil genius. Some call him the Putin of India, and I have no doubt in endorsing that viewpoint. He is worth way more than what you think he is. He has enough clout in the stock market today to make a 30% crash in stock markets. I'm telling you, if you're in stocks, the advice is you've had a good ride in the last couple of years. Please reevaluate your positions and please don't come crying to me saying, Sri, you were right, I should have sold my stocks then. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sri, for amazing speech and enlightening about your book. And the final time has arrived. Thank you for being patient, and especially the media folks. They've been asking me, like, when is the book launch? So the time has arrived. So I request Meenaji to come to the dais, please. So I request Jagdish Shetty to launch the book titled C Company.